again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. Late night hikers. What's the creepiest thing you've seen on the trails? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Not hiking so much as car camping, but we were way the F out there in the middle of nowhere on BLM land in Colorado. We drove for an hour and a half down a forest service road and didn't see another soul. You could see headlights and hear cars from miles away from our campsite. It's not like somebody could have snuck up on us unnoticed. We had 3 cars with us and 8 people. Just got done eating dinner, cleaned up. It was getting dark, so we went back to the cars real quick before hitting our tents for the night. Somebody had slashed the front right tire on each of the 3 cars with what appeared to be a box cutter. Everyone thought it was a prank, but it became very apparent very quickly that it wasn't. All of us were beyond spooked, like panicking, scary to watch spooked. We all had spares, and one dude had a gun, so we threw on our donuts while that guy literally guarded us and got the hell out of there. I still have nightmares about it sometimes, just knowing there was some person probably watching us, maybe wanting to harm us. Maybe makes me feel physically ill to this day. Edit. Well, this blew up. To answer some questions. This was south of Gypsum, and it was 100% not private land. This was a marked forest service road in an area with dispersed camping I had visited several times before. There were 3 guys and 5 girls. The guys were all together cooking the whole time leading up to us discovering the tires being slashed. These people are my best friends, and this would be wildly uncharacteristic of any of them. For those wondering how we didn't hear it, our cars were parked about 30 yards away from our fires and tents, and a car coming down a road is easy to pick out from the sounds of nature. A gentle hissing gets lost in the wind. We heard it as soon as we started walking up. The tires were slashed on the exact same spot on the sidewall. It would be almost impossible for something on the road to puncture the tires like that. Also, there was no cell service. We called the cops and rangers as soon as we got back to the highway, told them exactly what FS road we were on, and gave them coordinates, but there isn't a lot for them to do. Cop told us it was good we were packing and to be careful out there. I go hiking in the woods that permeate my town, sometimes so late that I get to see the sunrise out there. The strangest thing I ever saw was what I could only describe as a shanty town was built up seemingly overnight deep into the woods. Simple little hovels made of scrap metal and bed sheets and a small fire pit that someone had made out of an old tire, with the fire still burning, but that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that this was well past midnight when I found this place, and it was quiet as a grave. There was no one there. Someone made the trouble of getting a fire going and then left it. From the look of this place, it could hold about a dozen or so people, and yet there was nothing there but the fire they abandoned and whatever possessions they had left in the shanties. When I was younger and stupider, and going to college in the North Georgia mountains, my friends and I would go night hiking a lot on the trails near campus. I got pretty familiar with the area, and being out in the wilderness at night in general, which probably made me too confident. One night the full moon was out, and the weather was perfect, so visibility was crazy good. Everything was basically washed in dim blue light. I was slightly stoned and feeling adventurous, and I love doing fun stuff alone, so I decided to go enjoy a night hike by myself. I took a flashlight, but this was around 2002, so no cell phone. I chose a super easy trail that was mostly flat, maybe a mile loop, in pretty secluded area, but not exactly a national park or anything, very rural area. I didn't even need my flashlight for most of it, and just hiked in the moonlight. It was actually a really cool, beautiful experience. At first. At some point I started feeling uneasy, and maybe a millisecond later I heard a man's voice. It was coming from a good distance ahead of me, somewhere off in the woods, maybe from the right side of the trail. He was crying. I'm honestly an empathetic person, and 99.9% of the time I hear someone crying, I want to comfort or help them in some way. But this time I felt sick in the stomach, like a dry panic attack, if that makes sense. I remember coming very close to calling out to him, because my brain was trying to tell me he might be hurt, which was the only reason I hesitated. But it was like my body shut my voice down before I could say anything. and I knew I had to stay very quiet. He was sobbing like he'd just found out a loved one had died, but also gibbering and almost babbling, like he was less than a person. There was a shrillness to it, under his crying, like he was holding back a scream, but perpetually on and on, as if he'd been doing it all night. I remember it vividly, and my spine is tingling like crazy even as I write this. It's hard to explain, but I knew deep down he wasn't right in the head, and nothing good would happen if he realized I was listening. I went back the way I came. It was like I had tunnel hearing, and the only sound in the world that was crying. I was hyper aware of everything else around me, and beyond paranoid that I would snap a branch or snag my boot on something, I worried the man's crying would get louder if I wasn't paying razor-sharp attention, getting closer, or turn into an outraged, crazy person scream. Thankfully, it just faded the further I got from it, and I made it back to my car. Still, I was convinced some wild-eyed hermit was going to rush out of the forest and bite me to death right up to the second I locked my doors and got the F out of there. I finally had the rest of my panic attack on the drive back. I managed to park back at campus, and I just sat in the car and collected myself. Adrenaline is effing powerful. I've never felt a shred of guilt about leaving that guy crying out in the woods in the dark. I knew I was slightly stoned, but slightly is the key word there. I'm convinced to this day I was in very real danger that night. Definitely not as insane as most of the stories and threads like this, but sometimes I get that same sick feeling deep down whenever I wonder what might have happened if the moon been less bright, or if I'd been more responsible, and I decided to use my flashlight even once. He'd have seen me for sure. I've done a decent amount of night hiking, not nearly as much as daytime, but some. I think it's best really, at least at this point, to carry a headlamp, but only use it when you need to, and if you had those conditions, probably wouldn't need to, and you might have avoided a bad situation. I go out for walks very late at night fairly often, so I've seen a few things. The creepiest, though, happened about 2 months ago. I left the house around 1:30 a.m. and it started off as a normal walk. I wandered around the town till about 2 a.m. when I decided to go home. I was walking back the route I had come when I noticed a black van meander down the street. Didn't really pay too much attention to it though at first. I did pay attention though when I saw it slowly drive by me for a second time. I wasn't entirely sure it was the same van though, so I just continued walking. But this time I kept an eye out. And lo and effing behold, about 10 minutes later, the same damn black van came down the street again. This time I knew for sure because it didn't have a license plate. Now I was fairly scared, so I picked my pace up a little bit. When the van came around again this time, it stopped in the middle of the road a few houses in front of me. I stopped, turned around, and booked it back in the other direction. I made a few turns onto different roads and then ran right into someone's yard. I waited behind their fence, and the same effing van came down the street. I assumed that when they couldn't find me, they finally decided to F off. But I waited in that yard for about 20 minutes before I ran back to my house and practically threw myself through my bedroom window. This happened to me a few years ago. I used to go to school at the University of California, Santa Cruz. I'm a runner, and the campus is in a beautiful redwood forest, so I would run on the trails. One day I left a little later than usual on a run through one of the more isolated trails. Here's where it gets weird. I was about 15 minutes running deep into the woods and still hadn't seen anyone else around. Suddenly, up ahead, I saw what appeared to be a homeless man in ragged clothing walking on the trail. Now, he was walking further into the woods, and this path went very, very far, and the sun was setting, aka this man was spending the night in the woods. I wanted to reach my usual running checkpoint before turning back, so I decided to keep my distance and run by. As soon as I passed the man, he called out to me, "What came first, light or sound?" In my head, I was like, what the, is this guy nuts? But I decided to humor him and yelled out light. Without looking back, he said, "Well, I think it's sound, but who knows?" and started mumbling to himself. I continued on. I reached my goal and started to head back. It was really dark now, and I was feeling sketched out that I had to pass this guy again to get back. He seemed pretty crazy and potentially dangerous, but I didn't have a choice. I got past the point where I first passed him, but he was nowhere to be seen. There weren't any other branches off the trail, and if he headed back, I would have seen him by then. He must have gone off the trail. Suddenly, a girl from up on a hill screamed for me to stop. I stopped and looked up the hill, but it was too dark to see anything. I was freaked out. I called out to ask if she was all right, and eventually saw her climbing down. The hill was really steep, so she put in a lot of effort to get up there and away from whatever was after her. She said that she was on a run when a scary homeless guy started harassing her, and he chased her up the hill. But she didn't know where he went. She was going to spend the night there until I came along because she was too scared to go back down. At this point, we both wanted to get the hell out of there. Who knew if this creepy man was like lurking around watching us from the dark? So we ran back together and made it to the road. She thanked me and we parted ways. Never ran back on that trail again. Santa Cruz can be a pretty weird place. I've heard legends of students flunking out of school there and then just living in the forest. Maybe this guy was a student from years past. Walking home from a party late at night. I'm just enjoying the beauty of the city at night when I notice a man walking about a block behind me. 2 blocks later, he's getting closer, so I cross the street. What a coincidence. His route needs him to cross too. Half a block later, I cross back. Oh, hell no. Yeah, he crossed back too. About 2 to 3 blocks ahead, I see a homeless person pushing a shopping cart. I start jogging towards them and call out, excuse me. I'm so sorry, but do you mind if I walk with you a bit? Because, turn back toward my little shadow friend, this asshole doesn't think I notice him following me. Homeless person turns out to be an elderly black lady. She doesn't miss a trick. Pulls out a big-ass Bowie knife from her cart and waves it at the man in the lamplight so he can see. What you gonna do? You wanna play? Go home. Guy F's off fast. She was astounded that I approached someone like her, especially since it was not immediately obvious she was a female from a distance in the dark. I was like, I knew he was trouble. I figured, even if you were a man, best take my chances that you weren't. She walked with me for a bit, and we chatted about stuff. Nice lady. You know, male or female, that person realized that you were in danger, and being an inherently good human, stepped up. And that's it. Doesn't matter your status. You know, it's the quality of your character and your actions. Kind of whole Batman thing. Pretty late to the party, so this will probably be buried, but here it goes. One night, my friend and I decided to hike to the top of this small mountain at night for a meteor shower. There were 4 of us, all around 16 at the time, and thought it would be cool. We drove over and started hiking. We took a break about halfway when we noticed there was a guy following us in a business suit. We were weirded out, so we decided to start back up and walk a bit faster. But by the next time we stopped, he was like 10 feet away, so we bit the bullet to see if he just wanted to walk by. He didn't. He stopped and asked if we were there for the meteor shower, and if he could walk with us. Weird, a 30-something-year-old man in a suit, wanting to hike with 4 16-year-olds, but whatever. As we were walking, my friend and I noticed he was walking really close to our friend, the only girl in the group, like he could smell her shampoo clothes. We got to the top, sat down, and he sat down almost right up on our friend. With her reasonably freaked out, I made an excuse on why we have to leave early, and we promptly booked it the F out of there, nearly running the entire way down. When we got back to the car, we thought, cool, we ditched the weirdo, but no. When we were all in the car, our friend pointed out that this guy is full-on sprinting down the trail towards our car with a large stick. Being in a car, we just drove out and then very shook up. We chalked it up to some dude on some hell of a drug, but 2 days later, we all got a text linking us to a news report about a guy that had strangled his wife and then proceeded to kill another girl later that night on a hiking trail. It was the guy. The same dude at the same hiking trail. We never told our parents about the incident and never went back there. Ever. Not on a trail, but walking my dog late at night. It was about 1 a.m. My dog rang her bell and I begrudgingly got up to take her outside. When she wants to pee in the middle of the night, I don't take her very far, just in our side yard. I took a flashlight with me in case she decided to poo so I could pick it up. I'm standing there waiting for her to do her thing. She's doing the doggy walk in a circle thing. Then all of a sudden the dog gets spooked and whips around. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this chick just standing there. I didn't see her walk up. I didn't hear her walk up. I just see her standing there, super still. Based on her position, she had to have come from between my house and my neighbor's house, which is odd because behind our houses back up to a green belt. It is probably 40 degrees outside, and this lady about 20 is in super short shorts and a t-shirt. I looked at her, told her she scared me, and she mumbled something like, "Nice night, what are you up to?" Standing there holding the leash with my dog, I said, "I'm walking my dog." Then she said, Cool. Do you know how to get into my house? I locked myself out," pointing to my neighbor's house. Now, I'm a good American. I know my neighbors, and this wasn't my neighbor, who's a single 30-year-old female. She hangs out with my wife, so I know her really well. So I asked her, "That house?" pointing directly at my neighbor's house. She nodded. I said, "You don't live there. I know who lives there." She just scoffed and wandered her way into my backyard. I followed her, said, "What the hell are you doing?" She then took off running, scaled my fence, which, item of note, it isn't an easy fence to scale. It's a deer fence. It is a see-through fence that goes up 3 feet with cattle gate. Then the top of the fence is stainless steel wire that runs horizontally. It's the type of thing that, if you weren't expecting it, you'd easily trip over it as extremely hard to see and not very common. Anyways, she scales the fence and ran away into the greenbelt. I always have a pocket knife on me and was fortunate enough to have my unfortunately useless dog, so I looked around my house, neighbor's house for other people, shined my light in the greenbelt, and nothing. I have no idea how she wound up back there, what she was doing, what she intended to do, but she scared the ever-living shit out of me. It was in the summer around dusk, and I was camping at a remote campground with my dad. There was a lake right next to the grounds, and my dad and I would TrailBlaze through the forest right next to the lake, because if you went far enough, there was a really pretty waterfall. A few strange things happened on this hike. We found a splash pile that had little kids' shoes on top. When we came to a small clearing, my dad had to take a leak, so he faced one side of the clearing and I faced the other, and we both clearly heard a child say, "I'm over here." My dad thought it was me, and when he realized it wasn't, we spent half an hour looking for someone, but we found nobody. After that, we gave up on going to the waterfall and started to make our way back to camp. But there were clear sounds of something following us, twigs snapping, bushes shaking. We haven't been camping there since. Not so much hiking as walking home after work one night a lot of years ago. I normally get off around 7 p.m. and my walk home was uneventful. However, this night I covered a half shift for someone and I worked until 11 p.m. There was a trail behind some train tracks I would take home to avoid walking beside traffic and whatnot. I came to realize that that night those trails were a lot different at 11 p.m. than they were at 7 p.m. I happened across a guy who was laying by his bike moaning in pain. It didn't sound like real moaning, more like a kid's fake, "I have a tummy ache and I can't go to school" moan. I also noticed his bike was standing up on its kickstand. It didn't make sense to me how he would set his bike up properly only to fall to the ground in pain. He saw me and called out to me for help, but I kept walking and turned to make my way back up toward the street. As I turn, suddenly hear some shuffling around me, and the previous hurt gentleman yells at me, "I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker." He hops up on his bike and starts rushing towards me. At this point, I'm most out of the way up the incline, going towards the railroad tracks that ran parallel to the street. I haul ass up there, and as I get over the tracks, my would-be assailant proceeds to hit the tracks with his front tire and flips over his shoulder, hitting the ground hard. He is now moaning in pain for real and makes genuine calls for help. I use the payphone at a gas station to call the cops and explain what happened. They get there, and the other officers explain to me that this guy's village idiot who does this shit to rob people, and it's not the first time they'd seen or had to pick his ass up after he biffed on a bike trying to rob someone. I told the officer he threatened to kill me, and he laughed. Dude wasn't even armed, and apparently has had his ass kicked more times than he can count using that little line of his. So interesting where something or sound that would bring smiles and joy in the wrong context could just evoke goosebumps and put you instantly in a state of fear.